Welcome to the Mundus Fractura Lore Guide. This week on Lore Guide, we will take a look at the phenomena known as dead zones. Dead zones refer to pockets of what are known as absence, which can be found in and on the planet. Dead zones might be the absence of the magical weave or the psionic tide. They in many ways are like the sister phenomena of stable magic zones and loops. Dead zones, for the most part, function like stable magic zones, in that you may typically enter and exit the area freely. Like both loops and stable magic zones, they have a variable size and shape. And much like duration in loops, the effect or absence type or types in a dead zone will vary from zone to zone. Some scholars postulate that these three phenomena are all one in the same. A dead zone with but a single type of absence is referred to as pure dead zone. There are 9 distinct types of absences which can occur in dead zones. They are as follows. Magical dead zones. These come in 3 flavors. Arcane dead zones, areas in which the arcane side of the weave is null and non-existent. Divine dead zones, areas in which the divine side of the weave is null and non-existent. And full weave dead zones, as you would expect, areas where the entire weave is null and non-existent. Magical dead zones do not just limit the casting of spells. In these zones, where all or some of the weave doesn't exist, magic items of all kinds, regardless of the magic used to craft them, simply cease to function. Your magical talking sword stops chattering at you. Your wand of infinite pancakes stops pancaking for you, and well, you get the point. Though these effects are just temporary and only deactivate items while in the zone. This nullification extends to all other non-mundane powers gained by adventurers. Regardless of the type of magic dead zone, all magic-like non-psionic special abilities cease to function. It should be noted that mundane healing items and drugs will still function normally. As an interesting point of note, as some of you might be curious, though they were born of magic, Technasthi remain fully functional while in these zones. Their species is a living mechanoid, a machine created by magic but independent of it. All their systems continue to function, including their resurrection systems. And finally, before we move on, it should be clarified that though the devout of Mundus will lose access to the divine half of the weave in these areas, they interestingly can still typically commune with their patrons, which then brings us to our next absence. Patron dead zones. These dead zones restrict all access of priests, rabbi, acolytes, clerics, shaman, and any other devotee to their object of worship, veneration, or servitude. In short, it is a place where the gods hold no sway. Patron dead zones are hell to some. In a patron dead zone, you lose all ability to commune with your celestial, infernal, as well as any and all other types of patron. No prayers will be answered, no miracles granted, no catastrophes inflicted, and no spells can be accessed. Further, even those who do not venerate one of these beings will suffer the loss. Any item, magical or not, that either restores hit points or revives the dead will not function. Iron wood leaves and healing potions fail to work. Mundane drugs do still function as intended, so an aspirin might still help you with a heart attack or relieve a headache. Magical wands and other items that restore life or hit points become mundane while in these zones. A final side note, any items or special abilities that bestow or inflict blessings or curses do not function in patron dead zones. Psionic dead zones. As the name would imply, any psionic manifestations, special abilities, items, and anything that would cause psychic damage fails to function while in these zones. The psionic tide simply does not exist in a psionic dead zone. Spirit dead zones. In these zones, the phenomena of spirit simply doesn't exist. Further, the ethereal plane itself does not exist. Should you die before your allotted time, while in one of these zones, you will pass directly to the afterlife, or void, with no chance or possibility of reincarnation or resurrection. Spirits and denizens of the ethereal plane cannot enter these zones at all. Should any attempt be made to penetrate the zone's event horizon, the area will completely annihilate the target, erasing them from existence. It should be noted that Odaudir, the undead, do not exist in these realms at all. They can neither be created within the zone's borders nor enter from outside. Dead zones of the self. One of three effects happen in these horrifying spaces. The first effect wipes an individual's memory. This happens on a spectrum from total loss of memory to the point of that of a newborn human child. In these cases, you know nothing. The world is a swirling chaos, and all but your most basic instinct and emotions are lost. Typically, as you would imagine, these cases are a death sentence. At the opposite end of this spectrum, we have slight memory loss, like when you get up from a chair to get a pickle from the fridge in the kitchen, but when you get to the refrigerator and open it up, you cannot remember what the heck it was you wanted. The level of wipe vary from zone to zone, and can even vary within the same zone. The second type of the three self-dead zones is a dead zone of the individual. In these zones, there are no individuals, only all. This zone also has a spectrum of possibilities, from total connectivity to all living things, to connection between two living things. A connection in a zone may be based on community. They may be by family, some are by species, some by genus. But in each case, there is always a merging of your view of self with at least one other life form. The third and final known type is a dead zone of self-awareness. All sentient individuals who enter these areas lose all self-awareness. They exist as near zombies, creatures that are nothing more than pure, motorized instinct. The horrifying part of this variation is not necessarily going into the zone, never wandering out, and living out a life in this manner. It would be teleporting into this world and being protected from the effects in some way, then having to exist in this horrorscape, not knowing how to escape. Dead zones of a singular type are nirvana to some and hell to others. The ascetic, or the natural nation, have their capital in a full magical dead zone, and for them, it is paradise. For those individuals who seek a true connection with nature and a oneness with all life. Dead zones of the self, where they can be connected to the consciousness of all living things, are a dream, a heaven on earth. But not all dead zones are pure. Many are amalgam dead zones. I couldn't possibly explore every iteration here. Due to the spectrum-based nature of the dead zones of the self, there are literally an infinite number of possible combinations. There are further recorded instances of loops, dead zones, and stable magic zones all coexisting, or even just overlapping. If you ever find yourself walking in the wilds of Mundus, and something suddenly feels amiss, should you still possess your faculties, maybe take a few steps back the way you came, or embrace your path and the adventure ahead. That is all for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for future Lore Guide shorts, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.